For 16-year-old Maya Robinson, the world wasn't defined by light or shadow, but by the rhythmic symphony of a leaking faucet and the heavy, tired footsteps of her grandfather on the creaky floorboards. She sat at the small kitchen table, her fingers drumming a silent rhythm on the worn formica surface, waiting for the familiar clink of ceramic against wood. Eggs are at 3 o'clock, toast at 9, and the orange juice is just to your right, Grandpa Otis said, his voice raspy with the morning chill. A deep, wet cough followed, shaking his frail frame enough that Maya could feel the vibration through the floor. She flinched, not from the sound, but from what it represented. The bitter Georgia winter seeping through their thin walls because the furnace had finally given up the ghost last week. I heard you practicing last night, Otis said, recovering his breath and settling into his chair with a groan. That's Silas Vance's tune. Midnight Storm, right? Maya smiled, a rare, soft expression that lit up her face. I almost have the bridge down, Grandpa. It's tricky without seeing the fret jumps, but I think I found a way to slide into it. Otis placed a warm, calloused hand on hers. You don't need eyes to feel the blues, baby girl. You got more soul in your pinky finger than Silas Vance has in his whole expensive hat collection. Just remember that. Maya wanted to believe him, but the world outside their drafty kitchen rarely agreed. The yellow school bus smelled of diesel fumes and damp wool, a suffocating mix that made her dizzy. She navigated the aisle, counting silently 4, 5, 6 steps until her hand found the familiar textured vinyl of seat 12. She slid in next to the window, pulling her knees up to make herself smaller. There's the blind girl, a whisper floated from the back rows, sharp enough to cut through the engine's rumble. Does she even know she's looking at a wall? Bet she just sleeps in class while we do the work. Maya tightened her grip on her guitar case, pressing it against her chest like a shield. She turned up the volume on her headphones, letting a blues riff drown out the cruelty, but the words still stung. Then, a comforting scent of lavender laundry detergent settled beside her. Ignore them, Maya, Chloe whispered, sliding into the seat and nudging Maya's shoulder affectionately. Tyler's just mad because he failed math again and needs someone to punch down on. I'm okay, Maya lied, though her voice was barely a murmur. Arriving at Westridge High was always an assault on the senses, the screech of lockers, the chaotic thud of hundreds of feet. As they walked down the main corridor, a teacher's sharp voice barked, "Sit down," somewhere nearby. Maya froze. The command transported her instantly back to room 302, 8 months ago. The memory washed over her with visceral clarity, the hard plastic chair digging into her injured spine, the sharp pain forcing her to stand just to breathe, and Mrs. Higgins's cold, thin voice saying, "Sit down, Maya." No special treatment. She could still feel the shock of the wooden pointer striking her shoulder blades, the humiliation of being dragged to the office, and the principal's dismissive tone when she tried to explain. Mrs. Higgins is a respected educator, Maya. Perhaps you misunderstood. She stood paralyzed in the hallway, her breath coming in shallow gasps as the phantom sting of the pointer burned across her back. The bell rang, pulling Maya out of the nightmare, but the fear remained a cold knot in her stomach that only music can untie. The music room was the only place in Westridge High where the air didn't feel heavy with judgment. It smelled of rosin, wood polish, and freedom. Here, the chaotic noise of the outside world faded into the disciplined silence of soundproofing panels, a silence that Maya didn't find emptying, but full of potential. She ran her fingertips along the neck of her battered acoustic guitar, feeling the familiar grooves in the fretboard where the varnish had worn away scars of practice that matched the calluses on her own fingertips. "You're sharp on the G-string, Maya," Ms. Chen's voice announced from the doorway. Unlike the heavy, tired tread of most teachers, Ms. Chen moved with a light, staccato rhythm that Maya always associated with cheerfulness. "I think it's the humidity," Maya replied, adjusting the tuning peg with a microscopic twist. "The wood is swelling because of the snow." "You have ears like a bat, I swear," Ms. Chen laughed warmly, pulling up a chair. "But listen, I didn't just come in here to critique your tuning. I have news. Big news. Principal Roberts just confirmed the guest artist for the Christmas charity showcase." She paused for dramatic effect, and Maya could hear the rustle of a glossy flyer being unfolded. "It's Silas Vance." Maya's hand slipped from the tuning peg. "The Silas Vance?" The legend who wrote Midnight Storm? The very same, Ms. Chin confirmed, her excitement palpable in the higher pitch of her voice. He's doing a PR tour for music education. And here is the part that concerns you. He wants a student opener. One student, 5 minutes, right before he takes the stage. A jolt of electricity shot through Maya, followed immediately by a crushing wave of nausea. To play for Silas Vance was a dream she hadn't dared to whisper, even to Grandpa Otis. But then the darker reality crept in the memory of Mrs. Higgins, the whispers on the bus, the feeling of being a spectacle rather than a musician. I can't, Maya whispered, turning her face away. You know what happened last time I tried to be visible? Mrs. Higgins is gone, Maya. And this isn't about her. It's about you, Ms. Chen urged gently. And there's a cash prize for the chosen student. $500. $500. The number hung in the air. It was exactly the cost of the parts needed to fix the furnace. Maya thought of Otis coughing in the freezing kitchen, wrapping his thin coat tighter around his chest while pretending he was fine. The fear of humiliation was a heavy stone in her gut, but the fear of losing her grandfather to pneumonia was a sharp knife in her heart. I'll do it, Maya said, the words leaving her mouth before she could take them back. Leaving the sanctuary of the music room required a steeling of nerves. Maya stepped into the hallway, her cane sweeping a rhythmic arc before her. Chloe was waiting by the lockers, smelling of lavender and peppermint gum. So, did you tell her yes? Chloe asked, bouncing on her heels. I did, Maya admitted, a small smile breaking through her anxiety. I'm going to. Watch it, Blunder Woman. The voice was loud, jarring, and unmistakably Tyler's. A heavy shoulder slammed into Maya's side, not hard enough to knock her over, but enough to send her spinning against the lockers. Her guitar case banged against the metal with a hollow thud that made her wince. Tyler, back off. Chloe snapped, stepping between them. Does picking on a blind girl make you feel tough? Or are you just mad because you're failing algebra again? I heard she's trying out for the Vance gig, Tyler sneered, his voice dripping with the kind of casual cruelty that only teenagers seem to master. Does he know? Does he know the opener is going to be staring at the wall instead of the audience? It's a concert, not a charity telethon. Maya gripped her cane until her knuckles ached. Every instinct screamed at her to shrink, to apologize, to disappear. But then she remembered the furnace. She remembered the cold wind whistling through the porch. She straightened her spine, lifting her chin toward the sound of Tyler's breathing. She didn't say a word, but she didn't retreat either. The audition that afternoon was a blur of adrenaline. Maya stood in the center of the empty auditorium, sensing the vast, echoing space around her. She played Rainfall in June, pouring every ounce of her frustration, her fear, and her love for Otis into the melody. When she finished, there was a long silence. Technically proficient, Principal Roberts' voice boomed from the back, dry and skeptical. But are we sure about the logistics? The stage lighting is tricky. She is the best musician in this school, Principal Roberts, Ms. Chen interjected, her tone leaving no room for argument. If we want to impress Silas Vance, we send Maya. The waiting was agony. 2 days later, Chloe dragged Maya to the bulletin board outside the main office. Maya could hear the rustle of paper and the murmurs of other students. She held her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Well, Maya whispered, terrified. It's there, Chloe breathed out, squeezing Maya's hand so hard it hurt. 4th slot. The opener. Maya Robinson. Maya felt the world tilt on its axis. She was going to meet her hero. The roster is posted. Maya's name is on it right before Silas Vance. She whispered, I'm going to meet him. I'm actually going to meet him. The night of the concert arrived with a flurry of snow, and the scent of expensive cologne filling the backstage corridors, a scent that didn't belong in Westridge High, clashing violently with the usual odors of floor wax and dusty velvet curtains. Maya sat on a folding metal chair tucked behind a stack of amplifiers, her knees pressed together to stop them from trembling. She ran her thumb over the taped-up crack on the body of her acoustic guitar, a nervous tic she had developed over years of waiting in shadows. Out beyond the heavy velvet drapes, the auditorium was a living beast. Maya could hear the low, rolling murmur of 500 people finding their seats, a sound like the ocean trapped in a box. Somewhere in that sea of noise sat Grandpa Otis and Chloe, probably holding hands, waiting for her moment. Maya took a shaky breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She began to silently rehearse the fingering for the opening bars of Rainfall in June, visualizing the fretboard in her mind, praying her sweating palms wouldn't slip. Suddenly, the backstage door burst open, letting in a draft of freezing air and a chaotic swirl of new voices. The energy in the cramped hallway shifted instantly, sucked toward the newcomers like water down a drain. "Jesus, James, tell me we're not staying in this icebox overnight." A voice boomed, baritone, raspy, and unmistakably familiar. It was the voice that had sung Maya to sleep on her hardest nights, the voice from the records she cherished. But live, stripped of studio reverb and warmth, it sounded sharp, edged with an irritation she had never heard before. "It's just for the night, Silas. The Holiday Inn is the best they have," a smoother, placating voice replied James, the manager. "Just get through the meet and greet, play the 3 songs, smile for the local press, and we're on the jet to Atlanta by midnight." Maya froze, her hands stilling over the guitar strings. She shrank back further into the shadows of the amplifiers, suddenly terrified to be seen. 3 songs and a babysitting gig, Silas Vance grumbled, the heavy thud of his cowboy boots drawing closer. He stopped just a few feet from where Maya was hiding. She could smell the stale tobacco smoke clinging to his leather jacket, mixing with that overpowering, musky cologne. "Do I really have to jam with this student winner? Please tell me it's not a drummer. The last kid couldn't keep time to save his life. It's a guitarist." "A girl," James answered, the sound of a zipper being pulled suggesting he was opening a garment bag. "The school administration is making a big deal out of her. Apparently, she's a local prodigy." "Prodigy," Silas scoffed, a wet, ugly sound. "In a town like this, a prodigy is just a kid who can play Wonderwall without breaking a string. This is a waste of my time, James. I should be in Nashville finishing the album, not doing charity work to boost record sales for soccer moms." The words hit Maya with the force of a physical blow. Her idol, the man whose lyrics spoke of empathy and soul, was treating this night, the most important night of her life, as a marketing inconvenience. Tears pricked her eyes behind her dark glasses, hot and sudden. She wanted to cover her ears, but she couldn't move. "Keep your voice down," James hissed. "We're backstage. Nobody's back here but us and the dust bunnies," Silas dismissed, turning on his heel. His boot caught the edge of Maya's white cane, which was leaning against the wall. The cane clattered loudly to the floor. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. "Well, look at that," Silas said, his voice dropping to a tone of cruel amusement. Maya heard the rustle of leather as he leaned down, but he didn't pick up the cane. "Who let the blind girl back here? Is this security, or did she just wander in looking for the bathroom?" "That must be the opener," James murmured, sounding uncomfortable. "Maya Robinson." "Great," Silas laughed, but there was no humor in it, only disdain. "A blind charity case. Perfect for the cameras, I guess. James, make sure someone guides her to the stage. I don't want a lawsuit because she tripped over a cable and broke her neck before I even get my check." He walked away, his laughter trailing behind him like smoke, leaving the cane lying on the dirty floor. Maya sat paralyzed, her heart shattering in her chest. The music she had loved, the hero she had worshipped, it was all a lie. He didn't care about the art. He didn't care about the soul. He just saw her as a liability, a prop, a charity case. The shame burned hotter than the stage lights ever could. She reached down, her fingers trembling violently as she groped for her cane, feeling small, foolish, and utterly alone. A hand touched her shoulder, making her jump. "Maya." It was Ms. Chen, breathless and oblivious to the destruction that had just occurred. "You're up next. They're introducing you now. Are you ready?" Maya gripped her cane, using it to pull herself up. Her knees felt like water, and her throat was so tight she couldn't speak. She nodded, a jerky, mechanical motion, clutching her guitar with a desperation born of survival. She had to go out there. She had to play for a man who had already decided she wasn't worth listening to. Stepping onto the stage felt like stepping into a blast furnace. The sudden, searing heat of the spotlight hit Maya's face, burning against her skin, but it was the freezing silence of the audience that made her shiver. She could feel the weight of 500 pairs of eyes pressing against her, a physical pressure that made the air thin and hard to breathe. She navigated toward the center, counting her steps until her cane tapped the base of the microphone stand. A stagehand had placed a stool there, as requested by the school, but Maya paused. A sharp phantom pain shot through her lower back, the lingering memory of Mrs. Higgins's pointer, the punishment for not sitting correctly. Sitting felt like submission. Sitting felt like being the invalid Silas Vance had mocked backstage. With a trembling hand, she pushed the stool aside. It scraped loudly against the floorboards, the sound echoing in the hush. She adjusted the strap of her guitar and stood tall, her spine screaming in protest, but her resolve harder than steel. I will be performing Rainfall in June, she announced, her voice thin and wavering in the bass space. She positioned her fingers for the opening G major chord. But before she could strum, a heavy rhythmic thudding approached from stage left. Click-clack, click-clack, cowboy boots on hardwood. Hold on a minute, a voice boomed, magnified by a handheld microphone. The audience murmured in confusion, a sound like rustling dry leaves. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't need to see to know Silas Vance was circling her like a shark. "If you're going to play my song, sweetheart," Silas said, his voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescension that made Maya's skin crawl, "I want to witness the butchery up close." He stopped right beside her. Maya could smell the stale tobacco and expensive cologne again, suffocatingly close. "I'm curious," Silas continued, playing to the crowd now. "How exactly does a blind girl handle the bridge section? It requires a fret jump that most professionals miss with their eyes open." "I listen," Maya whispered, clutching the neck of her guitar. "You listen," Silas repeated, deadpan. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the room. "Well, you'd better have hearing like a sonar, kid. And why are you standing? You look like a stiff wind would blow you over." "I prefer to stand," Maya said, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. "I have a back injury." "Blind and injured?" Silas let out a theatrical sigh, turning to the audience. "Life really dealt you a busted flush, didn't it? Why don't you sit down before you topple off the stage and I get sued?" The laughter was louder this time, nervous, obedient laughter from people too awestruck by fame to question cruelty. Maya felt naked, stripped of her dignity in front of her entire town. She wanted to run. She wanted to vanish. But the furnace, she thought. Grandpa Otis. She took a deep breath, inhaling the dust and the heat, and exhaled the fear. She closed her eyes behind her dark glasses. In the darkness, Silas Vance was just a noise. In the darkness, the audience didn't exist. There was only the fretboard, the strings, and the vibration waiting to be released. Maya didn't answer him. She simply moved her right hand and struck the first note. It wasn't just a note, it was a declaration. The opening harmonic of Rainfall in June rang out with crystalline purity, cutting through the mockery like a razor through silk. Silas stopped laughing. Maya launched into the melody. Her fingers, calloused and nimble, danced across the fretboard with a fluidity that defied logic. She didn't just play the notes. She bent them, twisting the strings to ring out every ounce of sorrow and longing. The intricate finger-picking pattern, usually mechanical in the hands of students, flowed like water under her touch. Then came the bridge, the impossible section Silas had taunted her about. Maya didn't hesitate. Her left hand slid up the neck in a blur of motion, hitting the high string with terrifying precision. But she didn't stop there. She improvised. She took Silas's original, clean country riff and injected it with a raw, bluesy growl, a sound born from freezing kitchens, lonely bus rides, and the deep, abiding ache of being unseen. The sound filled the auditorium, expanding to the rafters, undeniable and overwhelming. Beside her, she heard a sharp intake of breath. The scent of cologne shifted as Silas stepped back, the microphone in his hand dropping to his side. The mockery in the air evaporated, replaced by a vacuum of absolute shock. Maya poured everything she had into the final crescendo, her body swaying with the rhythm, her pain forgotten, her blindness irrelevant. She struck the final chord, a suspended fourth that resolved slowly, agonizingly, into a perfect major root. She let it ring, holding the vibration against her chest until the very last overtone faded into nothingness. She stood there in the ringing silence, her chest heaving, sweat trickling down her back. She couldn't see the audience. She couldn't see Silas. She could only hear the blood rushing in her ears, waiting for the judgment to fall. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats, fragile as glass, before it shattered not with a whimper, but with a roar. It started as a single pair of hands clapping in the front row, Grandpa Otis, surely, and then exploded into a thunderous ovation that seemed to shake the very floorboards beneath Maya's feet. The vibration traveled up her legs, a physical wave of approval that felt more real than any sight she could imagine. Maya stood frozen, clutching the neck of her guitar, her breath hitching in her throat. She heard the distinct sound of chairs scraping back as 500 people rose to their feet. They weren't just clapping. They were stomping, cheering, a chaotic symphony of validation. Then, the applause dipped slightly as the sound of the microphone handling noise cut through the air. Silas Vance had stepped forward. Maya tensed, bracing herself for another insult, another joke to put her back in her place. Silas's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, and when he spoke again, the arrogant rasp was gone, replaced by a raw, unpolished tone that sounded startlingly human. I think we've all just witnessed something impossible. The room went quiet again, but this time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was attentive. In 20 years of touring, Silas continued, turning his body toward Maya. She could hear the leather of his jacket creak as he moved. I have never heard my own music played with such understanding. Not just the notes, but the pain behind them. He paused, and Maya heard a heavy exhale. I owe you an apology, Maya. And more than that, I owe you my gratitude. You just reminded me why I picked up a guitar in the first place. Tears, hot and fast, slipped out from under Maya's dark glasses. She hadn't realized she was crying until the salt hit her lips. James! Silas barked suddenly, but the anger was gone, replaced by a frantic energy. Bring me my Gibson. Now! Footsteps rushed onto the stage. A moment later, the hum of a second amplifier kicked in, followed by the rich, warm tone of a high-end electric guitar being plugged in. Change of plans, folks, Silas announced to the crowd, his voice vibrating with excitement. Maya, I know I don't deserve it after how I acted, but would you do me the honor of playing the finale with me? Just a blues jam. Key of E. Maya wiped her cheek with her shoulder. The fear was gone, burned away by the fire of the music she had just created. She nodded, stepping closer to the mic. I would be honored. All right then, Silas said, stepping up beside her. You lead. I'll follow. Maya struck an E minor chord, low and gritty. Silas answered immediately with a high, mournful bend on the B string. It wasn't just a performance. It was a conversation. Maya's acoustic guitar provided the rhythm, the heartbeat, the grounded soul of the earth, while Silas's electric guitar soared above it, crying and wailing. They traded licks like secrets. Maya would play a complex run, and Silas would echo it back, adding his own seasoned twist, treating her not as a student or a charity case, but as a peer. For 3 minutes, there was no blindness, no fame, no poverty, no best of charts. There were just 2 musicians speaking the same ancient language. As they hit the final synchronized crescendo, Silas leaned in close, his voice barely a whisper over the ringing feedback. You're a genius, kid. Actual genius. They struck the last chord together, letting it hang in the electrified air. The explosion of applause this time was deafening, a physical force that nearly knocked the wind out of her. The crowd began to chant her name, Maya. Maya. A rhythmic pulse that drowned out the years of whispers and insults. As Silas guided her gently toward the edge of the stage, his hand respectful on her shoulder, Maya felt a lightness she had never known. She was floating. But in the sea of flashing lights and cheering voices, she didn't see the dozens of smartphones held high in the darkness, recording every second of the miracle and the mockery that had preceded it, uploading it to a world that was about to demand justice. Monday morning at Westridge High felt different. The air wasn't filled with the usual heavy indifference, but with the electric buzz of a viral storm. As Maya walked down the hallway, she didn't hear the usual snickers or feel the elbows of bullies. Instead, She heard whispers of awe. "That's her," someone murmured. "That's the girl who outplayed Silas Vance." She was summoned to the principal's office before the first bell rang. But this time, she didn't walk in alone. Grandpa Otis was with her, his grip on her arm firm and protective. Inside, Principal Roberts sat behind his desk, looking sweating and pale. Beside him sat a stern woman in a tailored suit, a representative from the school board. "Maya, Mr. Robinson," Principal Roberts began, his voice wavering with a forced cheerfulness. "What a weekend! 3 million views on the video. Westridge High is on the map. We are so proud of our star student." "Proud?" Grandpa Otis cut in, his voice low and dangerous like rumbling thunder. "You weren't proud last year when Mrs. Higgins beat my granddaughter with a pointer for having a back spasm. You called her a liar then. You told me to drop it because Higgins was tenured." The room went deadly silent. Principal Roberts opened his mouth to stammer an excuse, but the school board representative raised a hand. "Mr. Roberts, please," she said sharply. She turned to Maya, her tone grave. "Maya, the video didn't just show your talent. It sparked a conversation. Thousands of comments identified you and brought up the allegations against Mrs. Higgins. We launched an emergency internal review over the weekend." She paused, sliding a paper across the desk. "Mrs. Higgins has been terminated, effective immediately. And we are rewriting the district's policy on disability accommodations. You will never be forced to sit in pain again." Maya felt a weight lift off her shoulders, a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying until it was gone. It wasn't just revenge. It was visibility. "There is one more thing," the woman added, gesturing to the door. It opened, and Silas Vance stepped in. He wasn't wearing his stage leather, just jeans and a t-shirt, looking humble. "I didn't just come back to apologize again," Silas said, looking directly at Maya. "I spoke to the dean of the Hartwell Academy of Music this morning. They saw the video. They want you, Maya. Full scholarship. Room, board, and a custom-made ergonomic chair for your back." Maya gasped. Hartwell was the Juilliard of the South. It was a dream she hadn't even dared to write down. "You don't belong here, kid." Silas smiled, a genuine crinkling sound in his voice. "You belong where you can fly." 6 months later, the stage was different. It wasn't a high school auditorium, but the polished oak floor of the Atlanta Symphony Hall. The audience wasn't filled with high school bullies, but with music lovers from across the state. Maya stepped into the spotlight. She didn't stumble. She didn't hide. She stood tall, her new guitar a gift from Silas gleaming in the light. She adjusted the microphone, listening to the expectant hush of the crowd. She wasn't the blind charity case anymore. She wasn't the victim of room 302. "Good evening," she spoke, her voice steady and clear, ringing out into the darkness she had mastered. "My name is Maya Johnson, and this is my song." She struck the first chord, and for the first time in her life, Maya didn't just hear the music. She felt seen. Maya's journey reminds us that true vision comes from the heart, not the eyes. When we cast aside our prejudices and truly listen, we discover that every soul has a unique melody waiting to be heard. Let this story be a gentle invitation to look closer at those around you, for you never know what brilliance lies hidden beneath the surface. If this story touched your heart, please share it to spread the warmth of kindness.